going to cover some basic tips and strategies to help you be a better speaker. Now this stuff, it's really not rocket science. It really isn't. The trick is really to take a lot of what I cover and actually put it into practice. And if you do put it into practice, I guarantee you're going to be better than 90% of the people out there. Okay? And as some of you are entrepreneurs, some of you are here in real estate as well, anytime you need to exude confidence, then a lot of what I'm talking about will apply, okay? So this is also really very informal, so if you have any questions, raise your hand and I'll do my best to answer those questions. And for future presentations, now some people here, as you think about maybe you'll be talking sometime, giving a presentation in the future, and you think, well, how long should I talk? There are a lot of variables there. It really depends on the nature of the event, right? It could be short, it could be long. Brevity is always usually good. A lot of TED Talks are 18 minutes, so that can be a good time. It forces you to have to be succinct, right? And that's the big challenge, is you've got a lot of information to communicate to people, but you've got to really be careful not to give them too much information, because it will just wash over and they won't retain it. Okay? I have a handout that you will get after I present. I talked to some of you before and told you that. Now that's a presenter's trick. You don't want to hand out content right when you're about to talk, because people will start reading that and stop paying attention to you. Okay? Also for those of you online watching the streaming, you can also download these tips that I'm going to give you at my website, SmartTalk.com, and that's 3 T's. If you just go to the speaking tips page, at the bottom there's a download PDF of these tips. Well, maybe you've heard the saying, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. I have a background as an actor. And as actors, if we didn't get that audition, if we didn't get the gig, we didn't get paid. So there's a lot of pressure on us to really work hard to come in with as much confidence as possible. So we work on our monologues quite a bit, but we also worked on how we walked into the room and how we introduced ourselves. So tonight, I want you to audition me. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 takes, and I'm literally going to walk out of the room. I won't go outside the door, but I will come back and give you 2 takes. All right, so here's the first one. My name is Bill Smart, and I'll be doing a piece from Christopher Rain's Living Wild, and I'll be playing the part of the man. Take 2. Hi, I'm Bill Smart. Tonight I'll be performing a piece from Christopher Rain's Living Wild. I'll be playing the part of the man. Okay, what do you notice between those 2 takes? Who are you going to hire?
Second guy.
Okay, why? So we said the second guy. Why is that?
I like to smile.
Okay, smile. Okay, really important, smile. Oftentimes when we're in front of people, people look like they're in front of a firing squad. Right? And you just don't realize it a lot of times, unless you video it or someone tells you. What else was different? Energy. What else? Confidence.
Very nervous. First one.
Okay, first was nervous. Okay, what else? Yeah, nerves. Anything else you notice specifically? Body movements, slouching, right? So a lot of, you communicate so much with your body and with your voice. So I'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is a key thing, right? You've got a message you want to communicate to people, but the way that you physically communicate that with your voice and your body has a huge factor in how it is people perceive who you are and how confident they feel about you. Now, how many of you have been at presentations where you are, like, where are the toothpicks I can get to prop my eyelids open because I'm about to fall asleep? Now, tell me, why is that? Why, if you're being held hostage to a dull presentation, what are the things about it that aren't working? Anybody?
It's not important.
It's not relevant to you. Absolutely. Anyone else?
The speaking is just dead.
What's that?
The speaker is just dead overall. It's not
Okay, the
important,
speaker has low energy, right? Anything else?
Method of delivery, if they're using a PowerPoint and just reading.
Yes, method of delivery, reading your PowerPoint. All of these are things that I'll talk about. And so there are a lot of things to think about, but you want to make sure the audience is number one, and I'll talk about that later. But there's 3 basic areas I'm going to focus on tonight that you need to take into consideration anytime you're going to be presenting. The first one is, I want you to improve your delivery, right? And so that's how it is you use your voice and your body when you're talking to them, right? The second is, how do you engage your audience other than your voice and your body, right? So that's really looking at how to organize what it is you're going to say, figure out who the audience is and if it's relevant to them, and other ways you can keep them engaged. And then the last but not least is practice and preparation, right? So what you can do to actually prepare for this live event that you know is going to be coming up. So let's start then with delivery. So as I said, this is really your instrument, right? This is how you use your body and to get across, and your voice to get across your message. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is inside an airplane, 1963. Lots of legroom in here, right? People are relaxing. There's like a wide aisle. This woman's pushing a cart down, big cart, right? She's not going to hit into the armrests on this one, right? And it looks like people are just, it's a great place for people to have a conversation, right? Well, I want you to think, when you are presenting to an audience, I want you to think of it less as a lecture and more like a conversation that you're actually having with someone. So that means you make eye contact with them and you're really talking to them in a conversational way. Okay, there's a back and forth that's going on. I'm sure you guys have, been to maybe an employee orientation, and you hear, "I'm so glad you're here for employee orientation. This is really good." Obviously, the person is not tuned in. They don't really care what's going on, and that's what's coming across to you, right? So let me talk a little bit more. There's a guy, Albert Moravian, and he wrote a book called Silent Messages, and he looked at, he studied body language and nonverbal communication. And he defined these 3 different areas when you look at how it is that people communicate to you live when they're in front of you. There's content, so that's obviously what you're saying. Body language, so that's how you're using your gestures and your posture. And then tone of voice, so that's if you're speaking softly or loudly, or you're using monotone, or you have filler words. And when in this particular study, you'll see that body language was 55% determiner of how people perceived what was going on. Tone of voice was 38%, and content was only 7%. Now, a lot of public speaking coaches take this and swear by it, and I actually look at it in the context of this particular study. The takeaway really is that body language and tone of voice are really huge, right? They're a really important factor. But it's not to say that content is not important. Content, if we were in this room and somebody said fire, that's 100%, we're going to leave the room if we thought that person was actually telling the truth. So the main takeaway here is to understand that there's a big wall of static between you and your audience and really getting that message across to them. So why is it that, it's said that public speaking is one of the biggest fears. Now, why is that? Part of it is, well, you want to do well, and you're presenting yourself in front of people, and all these eyes are focused on you, and it's easy to feel judged in that moment. Also, you could maybe take some stuff that you had from your past. Many of us, the first time we ever got up in front of a group was in grade school or junior high and high school, when we're feeling really good about ourselves, right? So years later, you may find yourself in front of an audience and you haven't practiced that much. Then, wham, all of the stuff from high school comes flooding back. And, it's a muscle memory thing, right? All of these people, all these famous folks, had intense, terrible fears about speaking in public and claimed every time they got up to speak that they had pretty intense stage fright. There's a book that I recommend, and it's in a handout that I'm going to give you all afterwards, by Scott Birkin, and it's called Confessions of a Public Speaker. And in the book, he talks about how in prehistoric times, when you're in a wide open space and multiple eyes are focusing on you, usually it meant you were going to be lunch. You were going to be prey. Right? You were not going to be around much longer. So that you had this adrenaline that came up. So that now, when you see this, which is a microphone for those streaming, when you see this, your brain sees this. And you know, it's this hard wiring of hundreds of thousands of years, and it really comes from a place of survival. We feel threatened, and you got this adrenaline, so I can run to that door so fast you wouldn't even see me get there, right? So we have all this adrenaline and no place to go. So I want everyone to normalize the experience of standing up in front of a group and getting nervous, your heart rate is racing, you're starting to get sweaty palms, your face is flushed. All of that usually is going to happen, and I want you to normalize that and just check the box every time and go, okay, yeah, I'm feeling nervous, yeah, I'm sweating profusely, because that's what's going to happen. And if you, that way you'll not freak out about it so much and think, why do I get so nervous every time I get up in front of a group? The fact of the matter is 99% of people get a little bit nervous before they get in front of a group, and the adrenaline really drives that. So what can you do? What can you physically do about that? You can breathe. I want everybody in the room to take a nice deep breath right now. Breathing in, hold it, and let it out. One more time, breathing in, and out. Okay, physiologically, that's what you can do. The one physical thing you can do. Now, you can't necessarily get up in front of a group and go, right? But before you're being called up, if let's say you're the third person that's going to be speaking, or you're sitting around a table, the breath, that deep diaphragmatic breathing, is the one thing that you can do to send messages to your brain and to your muscles to relax, and to send oxygen to your brain so that it can operate more efficiently. Okay, so that's one physical thing to remember that you can always do, and that's really any time you're feeling any kind of stress. Okay, but here are 3 basic tips that will make you a better speaker right off the bat. Really simple things. The first thing is simply to speak up. The majority of people who are speaking publicly just don't speak loudly enough. And you know, I have a background as an actor, and as I said, and if we were trained, you gotta fill the whole theater with your voice. You may not have a microphone, right? So we worked hard on that. I mean, I had classes where we were like breathing classes, you know, and ridiculous stuff that we did. In my workshops, I work with a lot of people, and that's a very common thing. Is people feel like, wow, well, I'm actually yelling. And the reality is, no, that's about the right amount of volume that you need. Because, so if I move further back here, the further I get away from you, the audience, my energy gets lower and lower. And that's the case anytime you're speaking to an audience. So you need to take that into account. It's going to take a little bit more energy, a little bit more volume than it would normally take. The other thing is, it's the most bizarre thing, but people all of a sudden see you as a subject matter expert just because you're louder. And it's not like you want to yell at people all the time, but it's really an interesting thing where you're like, oh wow, this person all of a sudden seems like they really know what they're talking about, and hopefully you do, it's a really easy win. Okay, so that's the first thing, is to speak up. The second one is slow it down, right? You get up in front of a group and you're nervous and you got the adrenaline going and you just want to sit down. I just want to get back to that chair as quickly as I can, because that would be safe home, all right? Well, you got to remember, it's the first time your audience is hearing a lot of this information. Okay? You know it, and I work with people that say the same thing over and over again, and it's really hard for them not to just rattle it off. As a matter of fact, I'll give an example of a co-working space that I went to. WeWork, and the guy who showed me I was looking for space. The guy who was showing it was, okay, well, you know, this is $600 a month. It's like just rambling it off. It's like, slow it down. I don't know what you're talking about. He didn't really care because they had a waiting list. But you know, it's just interesting how I just needed him to slow down because he was going so fast and he knew it. And he said it a million times a day that he just didn't realize how important it was to take his time with it. So remembering the power also of the pause. I'm always saying, respect the period. At the end of the sentence, respect that period. Stop. Give a pause. Let your audience process what it is that you're saying. Okay. So the first thing is speak up. The second is slow it down. And the third one is make eye contact with people. And I'll give you an example of what most people do when they're speaking to groups. And this is called the scan. Okay? Most people, when they're talking to groups, they just want to include everybody, so they kind of scan the whole room and they never really stop on any one person and actually have a conversation with anyone. It's just a scan. Okay? The second way, which I recommend, is you find one person, you give them one thought. You find another person, you give a chunk of that thought. You find someone else, give them that thought, and find someone else and talk to them. Now, in the second example there, even if I wasn't looking at you, I was actually making contact with somebody, having a conversation even though they weren't speaking back to me. And everyone in the room should feel like they're being talked to. Whereas the first one, I feel like I'm not grounded, it feels like I'm kind of scattered. And that's something you're going to have to, that really takes practice, but it's really important to make eye contact. Okay, you think, how long do I make eye contact with people? I don't want to make them uncomfortable. Well, when you're speaking to a group, 3 to 5 seconds per person is appropriate. One-on-one, 7 to 10 seconds. And there's a fine line between eye contact and stalking. You don't want to make your audience uncomfortable. So those guidelines are good. Again, don't set your watch to it. It's mainly just getting a thought across to that particular audience. Please, please, don't be buried in your notes. And please, please, do not do this. Facing the slides, reading them. It's not children's reading out. It's just reading bullet points to your audience is just not, it's a worthless exercise. And people will be irritated that you've asked them to come and hear you talk and you're reading to them. You can just send them an email. Right? So your content should be the same subject, but it's actually a little bit different, specifically what it is you're talking about. Okay, now let's talk about some of the challenges that we have when we are communicating with people and specific to our voices. Filler words. How many people here use filler words? Like, you know, right? Okay, most people use filler words. Now, I am not one of those people who is a fascist about it and says you can never use a filler word. Filler words are okay. I've used them while I've been up here today. It's part of our normal conversation. You just want to be careful if you're using filler words a lot. Like you're saying every third word or so. Then that's when you need to start to look at it, because once you are aware of it, and then someone starts to use filler words a lot, you will be counting every one. You'll be going, oh my God, oh, he said again. I cannot believe he said again. Right? So it's just the awareness. Once you have it, you'll find you can't believe someone use filler words. So what do you do about it? Well, one is replace that filler word with a pause or a breath. Again, it's okay to pause. It may feel like time changes when you're standing in front of an audience, right? It seems everything starts to speed up. But just replace that filler word, that with a pause or a breath. Second thing is, just extend the delivery. Stretch out that sentence a little bit. Stretch out those vowels. So that it gives your mind time to catch up with what it is you're going to say. And then, let's talk a little bit about monotone. Monotone is when someone picks one note to speak on the entire time. I'm sure you've heard this. Now, we all have the ability to speak within 3 full octaves of notes. I can go up here, I can go down here, right? But most people don't really play around with that much. And again, that's probably one of the things when I talk about at the beginning of this, when everyone was asleep and the guy was bored, a lot of that comes from the monotone voice. So what do you do if you have a monotone voice? Well, the first thing you can do is be conscious to try and vary your pitch. Try and hit different notes with different words. Sometimes it's just kind of random. You just got to play around with it. Listen, the next time you're watching TV and you're watching an announcer or you're listening to the radio, pay attention to what they do with their voice. Notice that it goes up and down and hits different notes on different words. That's because that's vocal variety, and it's going to keep you tuned in to what it is that they're saying. If they just use the one note, you would change the channel, you would put to sleep. Okay? So then the second thing you can do is read to your kids, or if you have nieces and nephews, read to your kids. Play all the parts, right? Have fun with it. Kids will love it. And then the last one is, if you have a real problem with monotone, make it a practice. Spend 10 minutes a day, maybe 8 o'clock, right before you go to bed. Buy a book that you really want to read. Get the audio book. Read along with the narrator. So pick, I don't know, one page, and you read along with that narrator. Be sure to get the narrator has the same gender as you, right? And read along with that narrator, following the way that their voice goes up and down. Practice that, then read it on your own without the narrator and record it. back to it. And then practice that every day and listen, and you'll be able to hear and see your progress. Free your voice by Roger Love, and that's also in the handout that I'll give you all today. And he is a vocal coach, has a lot of great exercises to help you if you have issues with monotone. All right, the last thing that is very, very common is upward inflection. Everything's a question, right? And I'm sure you've heard this, and it's men and women equally. And so the problem with this is it makes it sound like you're not really sure. So at the beginning, when I came in up and auditioned for you, first, hi, I'm Bill Smart, and I'll be doing these from Christopher Drake's Laugh and Wild, right? The other, hi, I'm Bill Smart. I just went down. That's all it is. I just chose a little bit louder, and I just went down. Only real difference there. So in my workshops, I work with people a lot on this where they introduce themselves when they say their name. And you've been saying your name that way your whole life. So it's a little bit of a challenge to shift that, but it makes a real big difference. If you're selling real estate or if you're an entrepreneur, people want to know that you're the one who's the authority and knows what you're talking about. And you may actually be a total brainiac and know everything there is to know. But if you come in and say, hi, I'm Bill Smart, and I'm going to help you, then maybe they're not sure if they're going to go with you after all. Okay? So for all of these things, what is it you can do to find out if you have issues with this? Use technology, record yourself. You don't need to lug around a 10-pound or 15-pound reel-to-reel anymore. Everybody most people have a voice memo function on their phones. So what I challenge everyone in this room to do, tomorrow at some point, when you were on the phone, now I know we don't have landlines anymore as much, but if you can find a phone to talk on and record with your phone or an external recording device, your end of the phone conversation, 5 minutes, listen back to it. You're going to learn a lot about your voice. You're going to learn about the filler words that you use. You're going to learn a lot about monotone. You're going to learn about the speed of your delivery. So I challenge everybody to do that. You will learn so much. And you know what? I hate hearing my voice too. Everyone hates hearing your voice because it sounds pretty normal resonating in your own head. But when you hear it outside of that, it's like nails on a chalkboard pretty much. But it's worth the pain to learn about what it is you need, how it is you need to improve. All right, so now we've talked about how to use your voice and your body to communicate with your audience. I want to talk a little bit about other ways to engage your audience. What is it you're going to say to these people? How do you structure what it is you're going to say? How are you going to use visuals? And maybe you might want to introduce some other voices, some video, something else to keep people's attention. So the first thing you want to think about is, what is your message objective? What is it you want to say to these people? Right? If you're giving a presentation, you want to really think long and hard about what's that one main thing you want to communicate to people. So tonight, I want you all to be better communicators. That's the one thing I want you to do, and I'm outlining how to do that. The other thing is, do you really care about what you're talking about? And this can be a challenge because I've worked with people who don't care, right? And they've had to do some mental gymnastics to really figure out how to find a way to care. But some of you who are entrepreneurs, some of you who are selling real estate, you've got to be really connected to why it is you love doing this. Because people pick that stuff up. Right? That's the good stuff. Again, that's that energy that comes across. But when you're looking at your audience, they're tuned to WIIFM, which is what's in it for me. That's all I care about. Right? And part of what may have been less compelling when you were at that presentation that was boring you is the person who was speaking just thought, oh, I'm going to speak because I'm interested. And it was, no, you're going to speak because you want to talk about what your audience cares about. That's what you need to really focus on. And if you don't think about that, then your audience is going to be bored. Nobody is interested in somebody, being an arrogant jerk in front of you, right? You want to be confident, but not arrogant. And really, it's all about the audience. The audience is king. They're the ones that you want to focus on, all right? So you figured out what it is you want to say. Now figure out 3 things, no more than 3 supporting points for that. And this is where brevity comes into play. Now I could talk to you guys for hours, about all the different ins and outs of public speaking, right? But I had to rein it in and come to 3 basic buckets of what I was going to talk about. And that's what you have to do whenever you're presenting. And because a lot of people feel like, well, if I tell everyone all that I know, then they'll realize how brilliant I am. Well, the challenge is, if you bombard people with too much information, they're just going to be be bombarded and not really take anything away. And it's harder, it's really hard to kind of rein it in and figure out, well, what are the most important and relevant things that you can communicate to that audience. And when you're creating this content, go analog. Get away from your computers, get some Post-its, get some Sharpies, come up with your main idea, do some brainstorming about how you're going to support that particular idea. It's a much more flexible way to be able to work on your presentation. All right, storytelling is a key part of any presentation, right? Whenever you're talking about something, you want to give examples. You want to tell stories about it, because people are going to remember those particular stories much more than they're going to remember the content. So I'm going to tell you a story, taking it back to the 80s. This is me on the left corner in a band, Nashville, Tennessee, early 80s. We got the call to perform. We were so excited, we said yes. We didn't have a band name yet, but we said yes. So there were a few mitigating circumstances. One, we'd only been together a month. We only knew 6 songs. And I was the lead singer, and I'd never actually sung in front of an audience before. But we said, let's do it. All right, well, the night of the event came. Now, I was a little nervous because I didn't know all my lyrics that well, but I thought I could do it pretty good. I was pretty confident. But as a backup, I had written the lyrics out on a sheet of notebook paper, and multiple sheets, put it in a binder, and I thought, I'll just put it at the foot of the stage. And if I forget what I'm going to sing, I'll be able to look down there and remember it. Okay, so they announced us from the stage, ladies and gentlemen, Modern Emotions. We came out, hit the stage, the synthesizer started, the drum machine started, and we launched into our first song. And I sang the first verse and the first chorus, and then came the second verse, and I didn't remember what I was supposed to say. Totally blanked out. It's like, okay, gotta back up. I looked down, all I could see was fog. Somebody had put dry ice all around the stage between our sound check and when we were actually performing. And I couldn't see anything, I couldn't see my feet. So then I remembered, okay, my best friend Barry Nelson said, if you forget your lyrics, then just sing numbers and letters and no one will know the difference. So that's what I did. So I sang numbers and letters through parts of the song, then struggled through the end of that song. And I was like, okay, only 5 more songs to go. So I did the best I could. I remembered most of the choruses. I was singing numbers and letters through the whole time. Just, I was just red-faced, flushed, sweating profusely, horrified that this was happening. So finally we ended, I went off stage and went out in my car and just sulked in the car. Like, oh my God, I cannot believe I've done this. This is so humiliating. 10 minutes later, knock on the door. The bass player says, well, Bill, you ready to do a second set? I was like, we only know 6 songs. She said, well, they want us to do them again. It's like, I am not going out there and making a fool out of myself another time. No way. She said, well, look, the whole band is ready to go. They want to do it. And if you really want to hold us back, just because you're embarrassed to go up in front of everybody, then you need to tell the band that. And so I thought, well, it couldn't possibly go any worse than it had already gone. And so I thought, well, all right, let's just do this. And I grabbed my notebook, and I just had my notebook with me, and I sang and referred to the notebook as I needed, and actually kind of had a good time. And the audience had a good time, and I kind of I took what was a really bad experience and actually was forced to have to get up again to change it to a positive experience. And then I moved on to other bands. This is Young Grey Ruins. That's me on the tambourine. Yes, tambourines are a difficult instrument to play. I don't care what anyone says. And then I studied, I became an actor and studied performing, and then moved on and evolved to doing public speaking coaching, which I absolutely love. Now, my trajectory may have been very, very different had I not have to get out there and kind of redo that experience, right? So this is an example of, what can happen if you get up in grade school or in junior high and have a traumatic experience. If you don't get back up on that bike or that horse or whatever, it can really change and that can really define how it is that you feel you can actually perform in front of people. All right? Okay, so that's a story that I tell a lot of folks that I'm coaching who are very nervous, because I want to let them know that I understand where it is that they're coming from. So this particular story, it's detailed, right? I told you some details. the name of the band, Nashville, Tennessee, relevant to the audience, right? You want to be better speakers, then this, I understand where you're coming from. Had a beginning and middle and end, right? Started with a phone call. Middle, we had me standing up on stage forgetting what the heck I was supposed to sing. And the end, sort of the triumph of getting back up on stage and redefining how it is that I saw myself in front of an audience. And then relatively short, right? So you want to keep it brief. All right, so think of when you're talking to people, when you're giving presentations, and you've seen TED Talks, a lot of them really incorporate story. And it's a story of something that person actually experienced. So really think about when you're talking about something, what's your personal connection to it, right? And how can we all relate to that personal connection? All right, so besides stories, using great visuals is another way to convey information to your audience. Now, you can see with my PowerPoint, most of the stuff, it's images and just a few words, right? I want to have you avoid reading a bunch of stuff. Because what happens is, I put up a bunch of text, you start reading the text, and stop paying attention to me, right? So I want this to help to kind of guide you and give you a background. All right, so where do you get visuals? Some of these visuals I shot myself, so you can use your own images. Be creative, right? You can also get royalty-free images. There's a bunch of places you can get them pretty inexpensively, sometimes like $1 an image. Or you can use Flickr and use Creative Commons. Who's familiar with Flickr Creative Commons? Anybody? So Creative Commons allows people to upload their own pictures, and then they will give you the rights to be able to use that any way that you want. And there is steal this presentation. There's a guy, his Twitter handle is Jesse D. Great tips on how to boost your presentation visually. Main thing is less is more. Right? You don't want to bombard people with too much information. People are going to be thankful that you didn't give them too much to think about. I mean, for me, honestly, if we could just get rid of PowerPoint, in a way, I think that would be a better world sometimes. Right? Because there's so much dependence on PowerPoint. I mean, you get slides like this, where this isn't Credit Suisse, but I used to work at Credit Suisse. It's kind of like a Credit Suisse slide. Right? It's what's called a slide-ument. Right? It's a document that somebody throws up, on a screen and talks to it and bores the audience to tears. You can't see what's going on here. There's way too much. Now, you might put this in the appendix. People may read this later on, right? They may need to refer to it, and there are instances where you can do that. But for this context, this is not helpful for you, right? All right, what's another way to keep your audience engaged? So audiences tune out like every 8 minutes or so. They just naturally start to tune out. So I try and do some interactive stuff with you all, but show a video, even if it's short. Giving a video break can really help to give a different voice. Have a guest speaker, even if the speaker's talking for a couple minutes, just so that they can give a little bit of expertise on a particular area. It's a great way to break things up. All right, so we've talked about then what you can do other than using your voice and your body to keep your audience engaged. Now the next is the most important thing to remember, and that is practice and preparation. All right, so talk a little bit about rehearsal tips, how to deal with some technical issues, and how to deal with questions. Okay, this is really big because I want everyone to remember this. Practice out loud, right? Because the number one thing people don't do when they're preparing to present is practice, is actually go through it. I can understand this because you feel ridiculous going into a conference room and going through your presentation for no one out loud. You figure nobody else does it. You feel, it takes time. And part of the importance of prep is setting aside that time. Like, okay, and I think you should go through your presentation at least 5 times, all the way through, regardless, right? Because you're going to learn a lot by speaking it out loud. Everything makes total sense when it's on the computer and when you're mumbling through, I'm going to talk about that, I'm going to talk about that. But when you get up and actually have to start and go through the whole thing, it's a whole other ballgame. What comes out of your mouth sometimes is not exactly what you intended, right? So find a room that's a large space. Go through that presentation in that particular room. Just carve out that time to practice. Put that time on your calendar. That reminder comes up, I gotta practice. I gotta get up off my chair and I have to go into that space to practice, okay? The other thing is find an audience. find some colleagues, somebody that you can actually do your presentation in front of, right? This is an actor thing. We used to ask for audience, but we would say, but I don't want you to give me any feedback. Because people with the best intentions can give you terrible feedback, freak you out about something that's not really relevant. So just say, I'd love for you to be the audience, but I don't need any feedback from you. Thank you so much. And while you're using a test audience, you want to test your equipment, right? So you want to arrive early. I have to tell you, true story, came in here early, right? And was setting everything up, and went through my PowerPoint. And there was I don't necessarily always do this, but I literally clicked through every single slide, and for some odd reason, in the middle of it, half of the bullet points that showed up just showed up as a dot, a couple dots. It's totally random. I have no idea why. I had actually saved the presentation on this thumb drive, and I saved it on the computer, and I also have it in the cloud, just in case. And so I restarted the computer and booted it from this, and actually copied this to the computer. Worked fine. Who knows why? But it's just Murphy's Law. You know, if it's gonna had a little bit of the blank screen happening as well. So I was trying to remain calm because I've got it in the cloud. I've got it here. If this computer dies, someone here has a computer that I can use. So being prepared for that kind of stuff is really very important. So other things to prepare for a rehearsal is you want to be careful about what you eat before you're going to be presenting. No lasagnas, no big heavy meals. Avoid caffeine. You're going to have plenty of adrenaline, right? You're not going to need any caffeine at all. Have some sort of backup plan like I talked about earlier. Print out your presentation. Have it ready. I have a printout. It's actually in my bag. But I do have a printout in case everything just melted down and it was just you and me and I had to talk to you. I'm ready to go, right? I can go through. I basically have a printout of my slides with a few notes on it, 6 per page, so I can kind of guide myself through that. Now, if you happen to be presenting online, which some people do often, some of you who may be watching Zoom can't see this, but this note here, it's a IM desktop, and it says, how'd that presentation go for your obnoxious client? Did that happen yet? And the client's on the phone in the presentation. So make sure that you go in and figure out how to turn all your IM off beforehand. Turn off all your ringers. You do not want to get caught with your pants down. That is not a pleasant experience. And if you do a Google search for disabled desktop alerts for Outlook 2007, 2010, or 2013, it'll guide you through how to do that. But have that on your checklist of things that you do. If you're using a webcam, avoid looking down at your webcam. You can see up this guy's nose. This is not pleasant, right? And also, this is an old Alfred Hitchcock trick, right? When he wanted to have a particularly sinister character, he would have them looking down at the camera, right? So you want that camera to be eye level. If you need to take a book or something to put that up eye level, you want to make sure that you're looking at someone straight on. A few things about questions. Now, whenever you're speaking, often there's a Q&A afterwards, right? You don't know, it depends on what it is you're talking to people about, but you want to anticipate questions you might get from your audience beforehand. Make a list. Practice responding to those particular questions. Have your colleagues make a list of really tough questions so that you're really prepared to be able to deliver those. Now, there are really 2 kinds of questions. Those you know the answer to, and those you don't. If you don't know the answer, then admit it. Say, you know what? That's a great question. Always complimenting is good. That's a great question. So glad you asked that. You know what? It's outside of my area of expertise, but let me get your email address and I will get back to you within 24 hours. Give them a time frame when you're getting back to them and make sure that you follow up on that. You can also poll the group. Say, that's a great question. Anyone here have any insight to that particular thing? If there's an engineer in the room and it's an engineering question, you know what? That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. It's important for us to know what it is our client really wants. So I'm glad we have this dialogue going. Bob, the engineer, Bob is the engineer on the team. Bob, talk to me about what you know about this. Bob talks, right? No one expects you to know every single thing, but if you make the effort to be able to explain it to someone or at least get back to them, then everybody's fine with that, usually. Okay? All right, so we've talked about the importance of rehearsal, having a backup plan, how to handle questions. I want to just review what it is we've covered so far. So the 3 key areas that we focused on. Right? First is how to use your instrument, right, your voice and your body to get your message across. The second was how to, improve your delivery on the way down, and remember how important eye contact is. All right. Second thing is engaging your audience in other ways other than your voice and your body. How are you going to do that? You're going to investigate, figure out who this audience is. What do they care about? Every audience is different, and you need to fine-tune your presentation based on that. Have one major key message. Have 3 supports for that message that make sense. Keep it concise. And then use great visuals. Really key. Again, clip art isn't going to cut it anymore, guys. Clip art, just do not do it, unless it's kind of tongue-in-cheek clip art. All right, and then last but certainly not least, practice rehearsing out loud, right? Have some sort of a backup plan in case of technical problems, and anticipate questions that you may be getting from your audience. All right, that's a lot of information for you guys. Anyone have any questions for me based on what it is we've done? Yes?
What is your advice for people who do not communicate well to get them to take advantage of your services, or just telling them that they can't communicate well? Have you run across that, or how do you do it? And a sub point to that, I know many people who say, "Ramon, I talk loud. I don't need a microphone. I'm the loudest person." You know, how do you? I never know what to tell them.
You know, one way is using technology. It's funny because I go to a lot of events, and it's a really sensitive thing because hey, I heard you speak. Here's my card. Oh God, you need some help, right? I hope that what I would do is I would record them or encourage them to record themselves. It also depends on the situation. If you're on a team with that person, and you can even, you can say, I think that I just saw this presentation, and this guy was talking about how just actually speaking more loudly can make a real big difference. If you actually notice, I've noticed that sometimes people have a hard time hearing your voice. Let's record the session and just kind of listen back to it. That would be one way to do it. But I think any way you can get them to use technology, I think that people hearing themselves is a real motivator. But it is a challenge because you got to be sensitive. You don't want to insult somebody. But ultimately, if your aim is, you better. And I tell people this in my workshops. It's like, you know what? If it freaks you out so much to get up in front of people and you don't want to do it, don't do it. Figure something else to do. But if you have a real motivation and a reason, like you are an entrepreneur and you really need to sell your product, or you're selling real estate and you really want to come across as being really confident and knowing what you're talking about, then you've got a goal. You got a reason to go through the anxiety and practice of getting up in front of people. So motivation is a big factor, and it's a little bit of a sensitive subject. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yes.
What about position in the room? We spoke about going back there, but what about walking around an audience? Do you ever recommend that?
I think moving is a good thing. And what's interesting is if the audience, I don't know, not to say if they're tuning out, but when you get closer to somebody, it's like, okay, right? So moving closer to people is a great way to be able to keep them engaged. Right? So moving around I don't have a problem with that. The problem with just nervous moving around, like I've seen people like talk like this, and they're literally just pacing the whole way. And that, it's this adrenaline, nervous energy they don't know what to do with, right? Or if you have a point, you walk to someone, you make that point, you walk here, you make that point. But it's just trying to avoid the kind of nervous, random wandering around the stage. Yes.
What do you do if somebody is participating in your presentation?
Heckling?
Not heckling, but adding to you. You're pretty much set, and they're inserting their expertise from the audience.
Well, it's interesting. I feel that it's helpful to get some audience interaction. If you are pressed for time, or the person is kind of distracting or kind of derailing or taking over the whole thing, you can even say, that's a really great point. Let's talk about that later, offline. I'll give you my email and we can talk more about that. I'm a little pressed for time and I want to make sure that I cover everything tonight. So I'm going to move on, but thanks so much for bringing that up. Compliment. I love what you're saying. I acknowledge you. It's really, a lot of people just want to feel like they're being heard and they're being acknowledged. And then you kind of move on, pull out the hook, right? Yes.
I have a question about question.
Yes.
In your opinion,
Do you think in most presentations it makes sense to give the audience permission to interrupt, ask questions, I guess it's sort of engage them, or better to hold it till the end?
It depends on the circumstances. If it's a really large audience, you may physically not be able to do that.
Right.
But whenever you can, I always encourage it because I think if somebody has a question, I'm like, oh great, you're listening, you're tuned in, and they're more likely to really get engaged in what you're saying if you answer it right then instead of going, I'm going to take the questions at the end, thanks. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to ask the question. So I encourage it when possible to answer it right then. If you get to it later on, say, I'm going to cover that later, you're getting ahead of me right now. You just want to, when you get to it later, you just say, oh, and as we talked about this earlier, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to skip over that now. So, yeah, I would encourage people to, if it's possible, to be able to communicate with you. Again, if you're on a tight time frame, there are many factors that you need to keep in mind, but whenever possible, I encourage people to ask questions and to give them the opportunity to do that because it really gives again, it's a dialogue, it's a conversation. It's not just me up here lecturing and people falling asleep. Like, I want to know what someone's thinking about, right? Yeah.
You always repeat the questions?
I try to, yeah, and tonight I was trying to be really conscious of that as we are streaming
You didn't
elsewhere.
repeat my question.
Oh, his question was, that's right, thank you. His question was, when someone asks, do you encourage people to ask questions? Right, that was the question, right? Do you encourage people to ask questions during your presentation? And yes. Thank you for calling me on that. Yes.
What do you think about people with accents and how can they excel?
I love accents.
You know,
I think
but
accents, yeah.
We're less confident to give a presentation to the All-Americans.
So the question is, what is it, if you have an accent, and what do I think of people, or what, I guess, what is the challenge, how do people who have an accent deal with that? And so I actually love accents. I think that it's great. It really makes you who you are. Now sometimes, depending if English is not your first language, a lot of other languages are actually delivered much more quickly than English.
Of course, if you feel British, it's totally cool, but I'm talking about people with
Yeah.
resilience. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think part of it is to record yourself back. Because a lot of people, when they listen to themselves back, they're like, I can't understand the word I'm saying. But they know what they're saying. Usually, a lot of what I find is people just need to slow down. Because again, in languages, I don't know if it's just in English, people are a little slower, but in other languages, they tend to be really much more quick, and a lot of people are used to kind of delivering it in a really quick way, and that adjustment can be a challenge for people. So usually, I wouldn't try and get rid of the accent. I would just try and be as clear as you can and make sure people can understand what you're saying. And usually, the best way to do that is to speak more loudly and to slow down.
I just wanted to echo that. I mean, I think I was at an Italian restaurant today. It so happens that I'm not a foodie. I don't know about food. McDonald's to me is like nirvana. So I was there. I guess he's Italian. I had no clue what he's saying. I mean, I had no clue what he said. So, but the key is if you would have just slowed down, I could have understood that he said lettuce or noodle or whatever he said. So
And
I just see him.
Again, so
That's all it was.
yeah, so slowing down is, like I said, it's a simple thing. Like the three things that I said are the biggest takeaways really are, speaking up, slowing down, and making eye contact. And it's easy to say that, but when you're standing in front of a group to practice doing that, it's a whole other ballgame. So that's why record yourself. That is one of the best ways, other than hiring me to help you, is to record yourself. And you listen back to that, and you can see, wait, I can't really understand what I'm saying. Yes?
How do you manage facial expressions, for example, if you get a sign or while you're engaging in a presentation?
So the question was, how do you handle facial expressions if you're in the middle of your deck and you forget a slide? So you're saying, so how do you deal with that if you lose your place, or?
Or any type of shock or
Okay, So, or any type of shock. Well, so the first thing is to try and have a sense of humor and understand that stuff's going to screw up. And the way you respond models how the audience is going to respond. So if you freak out and get really nervous, that audience is going to get nervous. But if you sort of have a sense of humor about it, okay, well, that slide just seems to have gone into a whole other reality. What the slide says is blah, 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 and I'm going to talk to you, not let it throw me off. And that's where knowing your content well enough that you can deal with the ebbs and flows of technology is a really key and important thing.
I usually give too much, for example, how to break that point, like when it's enough. You know, I oversell, so I give them enough so they don't need to go where else I need to take them. You know, like I got all that you have to say now, I don't need to listen to this anymore. Because my business, for example, I have a 15-minute presentation, but I intend to take them to a 2 hours presentation on the weekend. So, but then they stop asking questions, and I don't know where I should, like, say, hold on, you know.
So the question is, so you have a 15-minute presentation.
Should be.
It should be,
Yeah.
but it goes on for 2 hours? Okay, so
kind
this
of.
is the challenge. This is the really hard part because you've got a lot you want to communicate to that audience, right? You got a ton of information. I have books and books and books and books on presentation skills, right? And I could talk ad nauseum about different little elements. But what you have to do is you have to figure out, who am I talking to? What do they care about? I worked at Credit Suisse for many years. There was the IT and there was the business. Business would have a problem, they would hire IT to create a project and solve the problem. Well, there would be a discussion between business and IT, and all the business cared about is it going to be on time, is it going to be on budget, and is it going to work? All they care about. So that IT guy needed to talk to them in reference to those things only. So it's the hard thing to do, and you have to practice it. So again, what's the main takeaway for that audience, and what are the things that they need to know? And a lot of times it's really just giving them information for them to come back to you and wanting to know more. Right? You want to leave them wanting more, right? You don't want to give them too much, but you have to practice it. And really, there's an excellent book that's in this handout called Persuasive Presentations. It's by Nancy Duarte. Excellent book, and it talks about strategies for organizing your content and to make it most compelling. So yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. Part of it is practice, record yourself, video yourself, watch it back, really think first, who is this audience and what do they care about? And figure out one sentence that's your thesis for that, and that will help. Yes, Bruce?
So that comment about organizing, and this might be too detailed, but what do you recommend in terms of building that connection with the audience? You told your story kind of in the middle.
Yep.
What about telling a story about you in the beginning? How do you warm it up in terms of them getting to know who you are?
So the question is, how do you get your audience how do you warm up the audience? How do you get them to know about you? How do you use story to tell them about who you are? Well, this is one of the mistakes a lot of people make is, the first time they get up is like, it's about me, and I'm going to tell you all about me and my company and how great we are. And it's like, okay, no, you actually can move that to
Where's
later
that
on.
balance?
Yeah, well, the first thing is remembering who you're talking to, and really making sure that they're clear, that you understand, and you identify what it is that they care about, and you've aligned that initially, because they'll be like, oh, okay, well, he actually is tuned into my concerns. Now I'm going to pay attention, right? And then you can, but there's no real rules as to when something goes here and when something goes there. There's many different ways to do it.
Relevance or pertinence?
Yeah, but I think the main thing, really above all, is caring about what you say and having passion about it, and then just really figuring a way to structure it so you don't overwhelm people with too much information. Right? So there's many different ways to do it. Hopefully that answers your question. Any other questions tonight? All right, listen, everybody, thank you so much for giving me your attention. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this was helpful for you all. I have a handout that you will all get that has pretty much everything that I've covered. If you have any questions for me, you can contact me through my website, SmartTalk.com. That's 3 T's, SmartTalk.com. Again, thank you everyone so much.
A big hand. Well, now I want to redo my introduction.
That's a tough act to follow.
Smile, all those things. I hope you enjoyed this. This was our premiere presentation. Every month, our goal is to present a different subject for entrepreneurs, for small business people, for real estate people, to make us better, to make us more confident, to give us more sales, and to help us succeed. So I want to thank our sponsors, Marissa and Turnstone, Ramon Ray from Infusionsoft, and a gentleman from Worldcast who have videoed us and sent us out over the airways across the world. So thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you again.